and also to who are listening to us on our online platform. For tonight's speech, our monthly lecture, we didn't have to go too far like previous speakers. In fact, the speaker of tonight is Dr. Paya, Professor Paya, who is one of our faculty members here, long faculty member of this institution. Professor Paya, for those of you who don't know, is a professor of philosophy of psychology here, and London is an adjunct professor of philosophy of science at the National Research Institute of Science Policy in Tehran. His most recent publication is Methodologies and Perspectives in the Humanities and Social Sciences, in book, which lays down the foundation of a critical rationalist interpretation of social sciences. So it's also a text for he also has written a number of papers. Well, I had to read all the papers he has written. I probably won't have a lecture tonight. But it's a seasoned paper writers for academic writing. So for tonight's talks, we have on the methodological significance of a lesson on Treatise of Ibn Arabi and Irfan. The title is also for you to see here. It is obviously open. The lecture will be produced by Dr. Paya, and then we will have a Q&A session, which will be both open to in-house and our listener online. So without further ado, I will invite Professor Paya to come and deliver his speech. And thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming, those who are in the house, and taking the session live. The title of my talk, as you can see on the screen, is about a less known book by Ibn Arabi, cannot be trusted. And I explained the significance of this book in the course of this talk. So let me tell you about the objective of the talk and the way I have in mind this. The main goal of my present talk is to answer this question. Can subjective knowledge claims be objectively assessed? This is important because in the context of Islamic thought, the claims made by mystics are mostly subjective because those claims are based on their personal experiences. Now, the point which needs to be explored is that whether or not those subjective claims can also be objectively assessed, and then as a result of being objectively accessible and accessible, considered to be a knowledge claim, regardless of whether being true or false, but proper knowledge claim. Because as long as claims are subjective, they cannot be accessed by others, so they cannot be regarded as proper knowledge claims. The other point which I would want to share with you is, if that is the case, then can we claim that Irfan as a discipline could be located in the proper hall of fame for all proper academic disciplines? So is Irfan a proper academic discipline? And that means that whether or not it can produce knowledge properly like any other academic discipline. The next point is that if we demonstrated that yes, Irfan is knowledge producing discipline, then
should we regard Irfan, because it has been developed by Muslim scholars, as an example of Islamic science, which is part of the project of Islamization of knowledge? And by Islamic science, I mean what is understood by the proponent of this project. And I do not mean the traditional sense of Islamic science, i.e., those sciences which are now being taught in different houses or practices. So this is my next point, which I'm going to discuss with you. My question which would follow this one would be whether Islamic science, in the sense that is meant by the proponent of this project of Islamization of knowledge, is this possible? Is there such a thing as Islamic science in their sense? Because their claim is that Islamic science, which they want to produce as the outcome of their project, is much superior than the present modern sciences. I don't say Western sciences, I say modern sciences, because science doesn't have any national. Then I should want to turn to the question that what are the epistemic status of methodologies and methodological rules? So these are the points which I want to share with you. But before doing that, let's say something about Ibn Arabi. So, he was born in Al-Andalus, actually with a in 1165, and passed away in 1240 in Syria. He was a great mystic, a great Muslim scholar, although he was not very much fond of philosophy or theology in a technical sense of the term, but he has produced loads of things which are related to philosophical and theological points and interpretation of the Quran. He was a prolific writer. He said that he's written about 800 different titles, from short treatises to large books. His magnum opus is called Futuhat al-Makkiyya, which is a huge it runs into many volumes, depending on the type of print, 20, 40, and about 15,000 words or even more. And Futuhat is a proper encyclopedia of Islamic sciences, traditional Islamic sciences. You can find everything there, and you can compare Ibn Arabi in that respect with Ghazali, with the difference that Ghazali was much systematic. So Ghazali is different books to different topics, whereas Ibn Arabi talks about topics in a rather simplistic way. Two of his other important books are Wisdom and Tarjuma al-Ashbah, interpreter of Zohar. All these have been studied and have been commented upon by many scholars, especially Fusus, because Fusus is a short treatise, and very large commentaries. Now, Ibn Arabi was definitely a great genius, he had a talent for, he had a fertile imagination, and he had a tendency of undergo spiritual visions. Actually, his first vision occurred to him when he was a teenager. In a party, he was offered wine, and he later on narrated that he heard a voice that told him that Muhammad, you are not for this. And he decided to leave the party, and he went to a cemetery and stayed there and started that occurrence of visions was with him almost all of his life. When he was 33 years old, again he had a vision told him that he should leave Spain, go to the eastern flank of Islam. So he started to move towards the eastern part of Islam, stayed for a while in Egypt, Palestine, and then went to Mecca, and stayed there for 3 years. And there he also narrates that he had another vision. He was encouraged by great prophets, and actually perhaps by God himself, that he should write a book. The outcome of that was that huge. So in that respect, he was a great scholar. But at the same time, he had a large number of detractors and critics. While his followers were suggesting that he was a genuine genius, these detractors were saying that no, he was a heretic. And actually, many things can be found in his own works, which would give rise to that sort of conjecture. Now, I want to give you just one example. Although he was called by his opponents as Muhyiddin, the reviver of religion, his critics were not very keen about his status as an Islamic scholar. So, for example, one of the points which he has mentioned in his book is that he calls himself Khatamul Awliya. Implies that this position is higher, much higher than the position of prophets, including Prophet Muhammad. And so you can imagine that this may cause some sort of uproar amongst Muslims. I'm going to share with you an account which is written by Shams al-Tabrizi. Shams al-Tabrizi, as you know, was that great Persian mystic who discovered Rumi and changed Rumi from an ordinary scholar to a completely revolutionary mystic and a guy who changed the world with his ideas. So Rumi has a very important book, which is a collection of his sayings. It's called Maqalat, Essays. And in that book, he writes the following, and I quote, by the way, Rumi and, Shams and Ibn Arabi met a number of times. They discussed, and they apparently were very close. Shams refers to Ibn Arabi as Sheikh Muhammad, or just Muhammad. And this is the account, I quote, to make claims about this, i.e. concerning being a friend of God, is very difficult. I like the non-believers, since they do not claim to be God's friends. They say, yes, we are non-believers, enemies of God. Now, it is possible to teach them to become friends of God. to teach them Tawheed, monotheism. But the one who claims to be a friend of God and he is not, this is dangerous. As Sheikh Muhammad Arabi used to say in Damascus, that, quote, and side quote, this is Ibn Arabi's claim. Muhammad, Prophet Sallallahu is our chamberlain, our doorkeeper. End of quote by Ibn Arabi. Now Shams says, I told him, quote by Shams, why you don't see in Muhammad what you see in yourself? Everyone is his own chamberlain. End of quote by Shams. He said, he said, quote, where the truth is knowledge, there is no place for making claims and no place for do and don't. End of quote by Shams. I said, Shams said, quote by Shams, is it not the case that the true meaning of being a friend of God belongs to Muhammad, the Prophet, and being a prophet is an extra virtue for him? And is it not what you say about him, and that you deny his exalted status? And this arrogation of his position, is it not making a claim? That you call me, Shams, Ibn Arabi calls him, your brother and your child. Is it not a claim? Therefore, you do make a claim. And at the same time, you say one should not make a claim. Then Shams goes on to say that about Ibn Arabi, quote, he was a fine companion and a fine sympathizer. Sheikh Muhammad was an extraordinary man, but he was not in the habit of following the tradition of the Prophet. End of quote. So that was the verdict of Shams about it. There are many other observations which Shams has made in his Maqalat. Ibn Arabi was a man of conviction. He was absolutely certain about the correctness of his position. And because of that, he was not at all in a position to listen to others. He would urge others to change their minds. In a letter to Fakhruddin Razi, the great theologian, he mildly and in a brotherly way advises Fakhruddin to change his course and adopt mystical path and forget about being a rationalist concerning theology. And also he was of the view that those who are not thinking like him, his followers should steer clear from them, and they should gather together and form, if you like, communities of like-minded people. All right, this much for Ibn Arabi. Yeah, I don't know why the slides are not matched because I prepared for it. Anyhow, my second question, as you may remember, was, is Irfan a proper knowledge producing claim? In order to answer that, I need to tell you something about science and knowledge and compare it with technology, and then we develop this thing and apply it to the case of Irfan. Now, both science and technology are man-made, yet they are completely different. With regard to aims, science and technology, science and knowledge, note that I am using science and knowledge interchangeably. But not make a distinction. Science and knowledge aims is to tell you what is out there in reality. This is the aim of science and knowledge. And that is the only aim. It only tells you what is out there in reality. Whereas the aim of technology is twofold. All technologies serve two functions. One function is to help us with our non-cognitive needs. So, for example, this chairs you are sitting on right now is an example of a technology. It addresses one of your non-cognitive needs, the need of sitting comfortably while you're listening. The other function of all technologies is to respond to our, not respond to our cognitive needs, this aim of science. It facilitates, the second function of technology. Technology facilitates our pursuit of knowledge. So, for example, a telescope helps us to see the sky better and therefore develop our understanding of the situation in the heavens. This mic and this whole setup are examples of technologies in their second function. They are helping us to convey some sort of knowledge to us. Criteria of progress for technology and science knowledge are completely different. As far as science and knowledge is concerned, the criteria for progress is getting closer and closer and closer and closer to the final truth, i.e., understanding what is out there in the whole of reality. Whereas for technologies, the criteria for progress is whether or not they are responding effectively to those functions, responding to our non-cognitive needs and responding to our facilitation of knowledge. They are different also with respect to sensitivity to context. Knowledge science claims are all universals, whereas technologies are all context sensitive. And because of this, you cannot usually use technology which is developed for one particular environment without fine-tuning in any other environment. Suppose, for example, with the proper clothing you have on right now, you cannot go to the moon. For going there, you need another set of clothes. With respect to values, also they completely differ. Science and knowledge strive to be value-free. Why? Because their aim is to tell us what is out there, not what are the values of the scientists who have told us about this or that. So they strive to be value-free. They strive to be free from the biases of scientists. Whereas all technologies ought to be user-friendly. Otherwise, they will not be successful. So values of their producers and values of their end users are, if you like, somehow implemented, included inside technologies and technological products. Also, with respect to virtues, they are different. The main virtue for all science knowledge claims is to be truthful, whereas the virtues for technology are, for example, being durable, being affordable, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, remember, we are trying to find out whether Irfan is a proper knowledge producing. Now, with respect to the status of science and knowledge producing disciplines, there are three different images. Images of positivist, culturalist, and critical rationalist. Now, positivists claim that all knowledge and all sciences are about empirical work. So they are positivists or empiricists. Culturalists are all about interpretations of texts. So they disagree with positivists, but they maintain that there is a rift between hard sciences, which positivists are very fond of, and positivist project was to reduce all sciences to hard sciences, especially physics, and then physics to mathematics, and then mathematics to logic. This was called logicism, the project of logicism. Culturalists, on the other hand, are of the view that no, there is a complete rift, complete actual rift between natural sciences on the one hand and the humanities and social sciences on the other hand. They are completely different with respect to their aims, with respect to their methodology, with respect to all their aspects. Critical nationalists criticize both of these positions. They argue that both positivists and culturalists have got it wrong. They are just partially wrong, but not completely. They say that actually there is no rift between physical sciences, biological sciences, social sciences, and humanities. They are all parts and parcel of a continuous spectrum, seamless spectrum. And as you can see, and as this arrow shows, we begin with physical sciences, we move to biological sciences, we move to social sciences, and then we move to humanities. And although they are part of the same seamless spectrum, there are some differences between them. And the differences present themselves when we move from one field of research to another field, and in doing so, the degree of complexity increases, and as a result of the increase in the degree of complexity, new properties emerge. These new properties cannot be found in the previous fields. So, for example, when we move from physical sciences to biological sciences, the property which emerges is the property of life. Life is absent in the realm of physical sciences. When we move from biological sciences to social sciences, the property of intentionality emerges. And this is absent from this aspect of general life. And then we move from social sciences to humanities, there emerge the ability of having second order or higher order type of knowledge. So, for example, we have philosophy of physics, philosophy of economics. So, whereas here, the object of a study is society itself, here, the object of the study could be individuals and could be knowledge about individuals or societies or nature or living organisms. So this presents second or higher order type of knowledge to us. Now, humanities and social sciences have another type of difference with biological sciences and physical sciences. Again, despite the fact that they all belong to the same spectrum. And because they all belong to the same spectrum, they can make use of the resources, including the methods and methodologies. But social sciences and humanities are like the Roman god two-faced, Janus. This is the image of Janus. They are partly science and partly technology. And this only applies to humanities and social sciences. Social sciences and humanities are partly technology, i.e. they respond to our non-cognitive needs. For example, we use social sciences to control. And at the same time, they have the second phase, which is knowledge. They tell us about the condition of human societies, the human condition in general. Okay. I guess we can just is, yeah, I don't want to get bogged down in this. There are arguments back and forth between proponents. I'll just leave it for the time being and take you to the next. What I would want to conclude, so going back to what I mentioned earlier, if science, social sciences and humanities have two parts, and if science and knowledge and technology are having those properties which I just mentioned, then I could ask you again the question whether or not Irfan is a proper knowledge producing discipline. Now you're in a better position to get an answer for that question. And the answer is, in my view, you can challenge me, but then we can discuss. In my view, the answer is yes. Irfan is a proper knowledge producing discipline in the field of humanities because Irfan Nazari, the theoretical Irfan, produces knowledge, and Irfan Amali helps the Sadiq, the wayfarer, to answer his non-cognitive questions and facilitate his cognitive questions. And the question for Saleh is how to get closer to God. And Irfan Amali and Irfan Nazari both assist him in that respect. So if this is the case, then one can claim that Irfan, both branches together, are part of a proper knowledge producing discipline. Okay. Now, let me take you to the next part of the talk. The other question which I put to you was, assuming that Irfan is knowledge producing discipline, can we claim that it is an example of Islamic science in the sense that the advocates of the projects of Islamization of knowledge? And in order to answer that question, I have asked you the following more general question. Is there such a thing as Islamic science in that sense? Again, I underscore the point I made before. I do not mean traditional Islamic sciences. Note that I have not added any prefix or qualification. So it is not traditional Islamic science, it is just Islamic science. Now, my answer to this question is that no, there is no such a thing as Islamic science, and there cannot be such a thing as Islamic science in the sense that suggested by the proponent of Islamization project. By the way, that project began sometimes in 1930s, last century, and it is still, unfortunately, it's still going on very strongly in many different parts of the world, including in Iran, and of course Pakistan, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and a number of other.
Depending on the fund.
Yeah, depending on the funds, exactly. Unfortunately, there they have given that pretty large. Okay. Now, my point is that all projects are producing Islamic type of knowledge or Islamization of knowledge are doomed to fail. But why is that? There are at least three important arguments against these projects. So here is the one. All these projects are suffering from some sort of serious category mistake between science and technology. The mistake they are making is that they think that science can help people to decide what to do, and in that sense, act as some sort of, if you like, means for imperative doing or not doing things. But this is not something which science is capable of. Science, as I told you, needs proof, technologies needs. Now, the two should not be related. No science can do the part of technology. If something which proponents of this sort of body suggest is that Islamization of knowledge produces a type of knowledge which brings us closer to God and help us to do the God's bidding and help us to find out what is right and what is wrong. But this is not the case with any type of knowledge, because as I told you, knowledge only tells you what is out there. It doesn't tell you what to do. It is not about doing or not doing. It is only about pure understanding. Okay. One of the other mistakes which we are making concerning the point about certainty. If you go back to all writings on Islamization of knowledge, you note that the aim they are defining for knowledge is to attain certainty. But certainty is not an epistemological category. It belongs to personal psychology of people. So the aim, one of the aims which they have suggested for themselves is operating described. The other shortcoming of the analysis is that again, as I mentioned, they conflate the status of technology and science and run the two in a very confused manner. Another important shortcoming is assume that proponents of introducing Islamization type of knowledge have actually succeeded in producing what they have in mind. Okay, what is the outcome of that project? If the project is aiming at telling us what is out there in nature, then what is out there in nature is just type of knowledge, full stop, without any qualification. So even if proponents of Islamization of knowledge succeed in making an effective type of theoretical tool to explore reality, what they achieve is nothing but science thinker and without any qualification. There is nothing in reporting what is out there which makes it either Islamic or Chinese or Christian or so on and so on. So Irfan, even if it is a proper discipline, cannot be regarded as a type of Islamic science in the modern sense. You may call it one of, if you like, traditional type of sciences. That is fine, but it does not help those people who are trying to develop these sort of projects. So yes, Islamization of knowledge is for this. Okay. Yeah, we have discussed this. Now let's turn our attention to the main part of this. As I told you, Ibn Arabi has introduced a number of methodological rules. But why are these rules of importance? In Irfan, Islamic mysticism, just like all other types of mysticism, as I mentioned at the outset of the talk, claims are subjective. So the question arises, are these claims capable of being assessed properly? Or should we accept them on trust? So when an Arif tells that I had a vision, or I went through a spiritual journey and I saw this and that and that and that, would those claims be properly assessed, or should we regard them just as I'm telling you, and there is no way to assess? For this reason, in all the period where Islamic mysticism was being developed, genuine mystics were worried about proliferation of charlatans and those who were claiming to be mystics, but they were not. And that was not limited to just Islamic culture. In other cultures where mysticism is a powerful intellectual legacy, you come across the same worries. And unfortunately, when you go back and look at the history of thought, you cannot fail to see that, yes, there have been many charlatans who were claiming to be genuine mystics, but were not. So the question is, could we find any tool to help us to decide whether some mystical claim is on the right track, or is this hopeless? And we should all just rely upon the oath, rely upon the emotion, and take that for granted that whatever he or she tells us is correct, and we should not challenge it. Now, that has not been the case. A number of mystics have written a series of treatises on talking about the Alatat al-Salikin, mistakes made by the wayfarers. And in those treatises, they were trying to inform and warn their followers. They were trying to tell them that, look, there are mistaken visions, there are mistaken practices, there are ideas which we cannot adopt, even if they are being taught by great people. And in order to do that, they have produced a number of rules. And these are methodological rules. What I am trying to do is to compare some of the rules which are suggested by Ibn Arabi in that treatise with modern methodological rules suggested by the latest philosophers. Okay. Now, in what follows, I quote Ibn Arabi's views from the treatise, and then compare his words with the ideas of modern philosophers, and then tell you that whether the two are compatible. So here are the first two claims of that. الوجد الحاصل من التغير لا يعبر والوجود الذي يكون عنها مثل هذا الوجد لا يعبر. So what he says is that the type of excess, which is the result of a superficial, the forced, not genuine ecstasy, cannot be trusted. And a truth which is found as a result of such a state of ecstasy cannot be trusted. Now, these two rules can be compared with these instructions can be compared with the famous case of confirmation bias. The above two methodological instructions can be compared with the modern methodological rule, which states that a knowledge claim which cannot be properly tested or assessed independently by various researchers cannot be upheld as a true claim, truth about some aspects of life. So these two claims are pretty much like the claim which modern methodologies are making concerning the objective accessibility of knowledge claims. In number 5, Ibn Arabi says, personal mystical experiences which can have been expected cannot be trusted. Which have been expected cannot be trusted. Now, this instruction can be compared with the famous case of confirmation bias, namely people's tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with the existing beliefs or expectations. So if something which is being expected, modern technologies would say that if you reach a conclusion which you are already looking for, that cannot be trusted. Because, as I mentioned in my methodology classes, you should always challenge the knowledge claim which you have made, and you should not go for confirming evidence. So this is very close to that. Now, Ibn Arabi number 7 says that الحال الذي ينتج عن نتاج شروط الصورة المؤيدة لا يعمل عليه الرجال عليها. A personal mystical experience which brings you your spiritual states in the context of certain specific forms or images is not relied upon by the linguists. Now, this instruction can be compared to the methodological rule, which states that the results which are obtained by means of ad hoc arrangements are not tenable. This is an important methodological rule in modern technologies. Ad hoc arrangements or ad hoc hypotheses or ad hoc maneuvers refer to some conventional stratagem which are devised to protect a particular conjecture or theory from falsification. The claim of a pseudo-mystic who states that these mystical experiences only occur when he views beautiful things, particularly beautiful faces, and in particular the face of beautiful boys, could be compared to the claims of a psychoanalyst who suggests that a patient's traumas are due to the abuses they had experienced in childhood. Both of these claims are unrefuted, and both of these claims can be protected from refutation by adding extra qualifications. So, for example, the mystic would say, if you ask a mystic, why you are not being moved by looking at an ordinary face, and you could only look for beautiful faces, especially in boys, the guy may say, yeah, because those ordinary faces do not use enough, if you like, inducement. So by doing so, they would make this claim unrefuted. This is an example of an attachment. Number 8 says مصاب المكاشف الروحانيات من غير إفادة كذب لا يعبر. The conversation of the mystics with the spirits, if such conversation do not result in the production of some true knowledge, knowledge claims cannot be trusted. Now, this instruction is comparable with the important methodological rule, which states that knowledge claims to be regarded as such or to be publicly accessible and publicly accessible. These claims are objective, i.e. not empty and void of interesting information. Number 9 says that كشف الأشياء ساكنة لله بما تعالى من الذكر لا يعمل عنه. Coming to know in the course of a mystical experience that other entities in the universe are rehearsing God's name and celebrating His glory in the same way that you do when you're remembering God cannot be relied on. And next one, الوارد الذي يرد من تغير المزاج يرد من تغير المزاج لا يعمل. No, sorry, يرد من تغير المزاج لا يعمل. A spiritual or mystical experience which is resulted due to a change in one's health or psychological state cannot be trusted. Now, these two instructions can be compared with the methodological advice that knowledge claims are resulted from self-inculcation or hallucination are not accessible in the public arena and therefore cannot be replicated and therefore cannot be regarded as proper knowledge. Now, these are some examples of cases where Ibn Arabi suggests some methodological rules which are comparable with some of the modern methods. But there are other cases, and by the way, he has produced 319 of these suggestions. Some of his suggestions are not compatible with what modern scientists are saying. I have chosen a couple of cases. Here is one of those cases. كل علم sorry this is next. كل علم من طريق الكشف والإلغاء أو الإلغاء والكناية بحقيقة تخالف الشريعة وتغير. All knowledge claims obtained through the unconcealment on veiling the course of mystical experience or inculcation or knowledge by presence or allusion to the truth, if they are against the rulings of Sharia, are not reliable. Now, this is something which modern methodologies do not agree with, because they say that when it comes to knowledge claims, you should be absolutely open to all suggestions, all types of suggestions. What you need to do at the end is just to make sure that you critically assess, but you do not stop them at the beginning. You let them come. You do not declare them to be unreliable at the very outset. Now, it is interesting that although Ibn Arabi has suggested this, he himself has not complied with this. in his Futuhat, he narrates a vision which is rather eyebrow raising, raising, yes, eyebrow raising. He says that once in Mecca and once he was going around Kaaba, he saw the vision of a young man, handsome man, who was neither alive nor dead. And the young man started communicating with him in a mystical manner, which Ibn Arabi realized. And they started talking, and the young man told him that is of my hope, and you will see all the secrets in the universe. And then he goes on to discuss this further and further, and then you realize that, oh, Ibn Arabi is talking about meeting God himself. And as we know, meeting God, at least Moses was not able to do so. And God has said in the Quran that man tarani, cannot ever sin. And yet Ibn Arabi suggests that he was the one who was able to see God and talk to him and learn from him and get secret knowledge. So that is one of the cases which he has not himself and observed. Another point which he says is number 7. He says that as of course, this is something which many scholars in the Islamic land, and of course in the West as well, were believing in, they were thinking that conjectures and guessworks cannot be trusted. Again, this is something which completely rejected by modern methodologies. All modern methodologies and epistemologies maintain that knowledge claims are all conjectures. And as I mentioned, certainty is not at all part of knowledge. Certainty is psychology. So this is again another part of this claims which is not compatible with modern. Another point which he says is number 87. كل كلام الله يؤثر في الرد الصالح مراد مصنع فهو قول لا كلام سمع إلا قول ولا يعمل على الصحيح والقول الصحيح. All types of discourse which do not affect the heart of the hearer in their intended way are just strings of words or mere sayings, and the hearer has heard nothing but a string of words. Therefore, they should not rely on what they have heard. And even if the saying or the thing, strings of words is correct. So basically what he is suggesting is that in these cases, when you do not feel right in your heart or in your gut, you should not rely upon the Quran. As you can see, again, this is not acceptable by modern technologies because the assumption behind this is that claims ought to produce certainty. And if something you do not feel happy with, that claim becomes worthless. Whereas in modern epistemologies and modern methodologies, as you mentioned earlier, all claims can be regarded as conveying some sort of useful message, which could have heuristic values. And because claims of all types could have heuristic values, we should not dismiss them offhand because we do not feel happy. Okay, I think I have come to the end of my talk. Let me very briefly just tell you what we covered. My aim was to see whether mystical claims are purely subjective or can be regarded as objective as well. And the case in point was Irfan, and we saw that Orafa themselves regard their subjective claims to be capable of being transferred to the public arena. Therefore, to be capable of being regarded as proper knowledge claim, which can be assessed properly. And the other point which I tried to share with you was that Irfan cannot be regarded as part of modern project of Islamization of science or knowledge. That project is completely hopeless. Okay, thank you so much for your patience.
Very nice. Final thing, we will start to open the button for questions. We have our audience online as well, so please have your hands up. You can have a question. Or let's start first with the audience here in the room. Yes, we have Mr. Terani there. Terani?
Thank you for the distinction that you made between physical science or logical science. Biological science, the issue of the body. Now, is this a distinction that you have made yourself, or is this can be sourced?
Okay, all right. That is itself a very mistaken methodological epistemological addiction. You should not talk about or ask about reference. You should think about the argument itself. Okay, of course, I can suggest some references, but think about the argument itself. Yeah, if the argument is fine, forget about. Just suppose just suppose yours truly is the author of that talk. It is important, epistemically speaking, important that you look at the argument, about the argument, and don't forget about the author. Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Right. Let me.
Yeah, there is apparently no question, which is not.
It's over there, yes. This is the OR.
I wanted to ask about the rules. In the rule 1 and 2, it was mentioned that the type of ecstasy which is not superficial, of course, not genuine effort, it will be trust. But if we talk about the objectivity, how do we judge effort?
Remember, Sadek goes through a number of practices or activities in order to achieve some sort of inner inspiration. Okay, now, according to mystical teachings, if your intention while you are going through those practices are not clean enough, or if you have not followed the rules properly, okay, the outcome of your efforts cannot be regarded as passing the test. So there are ways for assessing the validity of your effort. Based upon that, Ibn Arabi is suggesting that you should look back at what you have achieved and trace back your steps. If the result has not been according to the proper observation of all rules and practices, then forget about it. Because it is always possible that you achieve something, even through wrong route. But it is important to observe the absolutely correct way of practicing the instructions.
Instructions can be very elusive. They are so experienced that how
Okay. But there are two ways. One is for you personally, because people cannot deceive themselves. If they decide, they may, with the will of power, with the power of will, they may. But if they are trying to be sincere with themselves, and if they apply that process of introspection, then they can see whether they have been 100%, if you like, diligent or not. This is something which all of us have experienced and can experience quite easily. When you look back, the very sense of regret, the very sense of feeling that you have made a mistake arises from that very ability to be able to judge yourself properly. When you blame yourself for a reason. Remember, none of us can do a thing without a reason. You know this? This is called the principle of sufficient reason. Whatever we do, there ought to be a reason for it. Nothing can be done without a reason. Is it clear? This is a very important principle. Actually, in philosophy, it is called the principle, as I said, it is mentioned by Leibniz, it is called the principle of sufficient reason. And there is a thought experiment for this. Actually, I was teaching this yesterday to my students. It was first suggested by Aristotle, then in 13th century by a French philosopher whose name was Johannes Buridan, and it is called Buridan-As. And Buridan-As is a thought experiment which goes as follows. He kept his poor ass few days, gave it nothing to eat. So the ass was pretty hungry. Then he placed before us in equidistant places 2 sacks of hay, and then asked the following important question. What does the poor ass do when confronting those 2 haystacks? And the answer is, because there is nothing between the 2 haystacks to make a distinction, the ass cannot make a decision. There will be no reason for it to move in this direction or that direction. So the poor ass remains there and dies. This is important because it says that in the absence of a reason, we cannot act. So when you start blaming yourself internally, okay, you feel the sense of guilt. That is because you have sensed something in yourself. You have discovered something in yourself. This should disappear. All right? So this much for your inner ability to judge. But there is also a possibility for Murshid, and this is something which is quite common inside mystical circles. Murshid or Wali or the guide observes the activities of the student carefully and closely and with hawkish eyes. Being in a position of authority, he most of the time is capable of discerning whether the student has followed the rules to the letter. And if he has not, then he would be able to bring to his attention that, look, you have failed these steps. So there is always a possibility. But let me qualify what I told you. If you are looking for 100% fail-free mechanism, okay, that I can assure you that you cannot find this even in most important modern sciences. Nothing is 100% fail-free. Because whatever we do is based upon some sort of conjecture or hunch, which we project to reality. And then we take it from there to the best of our ability and to the best of the approximation power of our technology. To give you an example, think about a meter. How is the degree of accuracy of that meter, an ordinary rod of meter? Then compare that meter with some sort of sophisticated technology for measuring distances. The margin of errors there is much lower than the margin of error here. But there is always a margin of error in whatever we do. So margins of error cannot be eliminated. Cannot. That same rule applies to the case of Irfan. Although you do not seem to be happy.
I've got a question online first.
Okay.
Here for a while. Okay. It's from Ibn Arabi. Says, thank you, Dr. Paya. It was a great to listen to you talk after a long time. My question is, apart from the compliance with the Sharia, are there other criteria that could be applied to the test of authenticity of mystical experience?
Yeah, you see, mystics have discussed many different rules in order to make sure that learners or students follow the correct path. But that requires a course in mysticism to take you or him through that. But there are plenty.
Thank you, Dr. Jahangir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paya. It was more of a kalam al-mu'assir fil qalb, very good, thank you. My question is about the whole compatibility of Irfan. So you showed some of the words of Ibn Arabi, modern methodologies, and some are not consistent. But the point is, if we go to the works and the ideas of Ibn Arabi, the image which they show about Irfan is very much unique in the sense that the methodology of Irfan doesn't deal with cognition, but cognitive faculties. Even in Irfan and Nazari, they talk about a very unique vision. And afterwards, Irfan Amali, its functions, the waiter may reach to a very unique vision about existence and universe. And that unique vision, when you want to put it in the form of the normal language, it can be misinterpreted because it's so unique, because it's the result of intuition. Sure, it's not the result of cognition, understanding, analyzing, cross-checking with, I don't know, some intellectual benchmarks. It's not about this. So when that is the reality of Irfan, how we are going to compare with modern science, modern scientific methodology, to see what part of it is consistent with this and what part of it is not. So in a sense, Irfan seems to be, at least the way that Rumi and Al-Zabi and Al-Arabi seems to be the expansion of a very unique experience, like the experience of the Prophet. So that prophetic experience, how do you want to compare it with modern science?
No, Doctor, thank you so much, because that is a very good question. Helps me to dispel many mistaken ideas about modern sciences and Irfan. If I tell you that what you just told me and the audience about the particularities of Irfan, exactly word by word applies to all disciplines in modern science. All disciplines. And let me explain.
They work with shuhud?
All disciplines, of course.
Based on shuhud.
All disciplines. Actually, one of the points which I teach in my classes is that in the absence of that intuition, personal shuhud, no knowledge is possible. No knowledge is possible. But let me develop on that because it is important. And I'm really thankful to you for raising. We begin our understanding of reality by admitting the fact that there is a separation between us, the knower, and reality, which we want to know, the object of our exploration. Okay? It is impossible for us to have direct epistemic access to reality. I repeat, it is impossible for us to have direct epistemic access to reality. All of the epistemic access to reality are through models, images, conjectures, and so on and so forth. All constructed by us in the hope that we capture some aspects of reality. But because it is constructed by us, and who are we? We are fallible individuals with limited cognitive abilities, which are not perfect. Whatever an imperfect entity produces cannot be perfect. So whatever knowledge, whatever image, conjecture, model, of it we produce is bound to be imperfect. Bound to be imperfect. Now, when reality challenges us by introducing a problem to us, we become desperate to find a solution. Solutions do not come by cheaply, do not come by easily. For stumbling upon proper solution, you need to go through a great deal of efforts. And the sad news, the bad news, the negative news is that unfortunately, there is no sufficient condition for us to fulfill, to acquire solution about problems which we encounter in dealing with reality. The only thing which is at our disposal is a set of necessary conditions, but no sufficient condition. What are those necessary conditions, or at least some of those necessary conditions? If you are dealing with a genuine problem, the first thing which you ought to have as a necessary condition is some sort of background knowledge about the problem you are dealing with. Let me give you an example. Suppose you are trying to solve a problem in the field of quantum mechanics. If you know nothing about quantum mechanics, it would be hopeless if you think that you will be able to tackle it without acquiring that proper background knowledge beforehand. So having a proper background knowledge with respect to the problem you have encountered is the first necessary condition. The other necessary condition is that when you want to find a solution, a genuine solution, you need to be systematic in your approach to the problem. You cannot adopt a haphazard approach and hope that at the end it will give you the result. Another necessary condition is that it will always help that if you are in an environment which is conducive to helping you towards the solution. So an environment of not like-minded, but knowledgeable other individuals who will be able to give you advice and support you is another necessary condition which can help you to get closer to the solution you are aiming at. Another problem, another necessary condition is that you need to be at the right time and in the right place. Let me give you an example. Again, the example which I gave my students yesterday. In 17th century, Pierre Fermat, a French mathematician, suggested a number of problems, including the following, which was his last problem. It is a very simple problem. He said that x to the power of n plus y to the power of n equals z to the power of n. And he posed the following question to all mathematicians of this time. He said, let's find to which quantity for n this equation would hold. And he said that I have got one solution for the first case of this class of problems. If we give n the quantity 2, then it becomes the famous Pythagorean theorem. The square of the hypotenuse is the square of the two side parts. Remember Pythagorean. And then he went on to say that I have found this general solution, but the margin of my notebook is too short. I write it somewhere else, but the poor guy died after that. So people could not find the solution. Now, from 17th century to 20th century, late 20th century, 300 years, the greatest mind which humanity had produced tried to solve this problem. None was able to do that. None. It was solved in late, I think 1990s, by a British mathematician. But in order to solve that, he had to bring the machinery of the latest, most sophisticated mathematical systems. Most sophisticated. And the proof for that simple theorem ran into 200 pages. And it took 5 years of an independent group of mathematicians to check the validity of the proof. And of course, in the course of that, they found some fault. So the authors went back, started working again, and at the end, it was completed. So, solutions cannot be gained easily. It very much depends where are you, what are means at your disposal, and so on and so on. However, now assume that you have fulfilled all the conditions, and in your pursuit for finding the solution, this is what happens almost all the time. And this has been reported by greatest scientists over the ages. If you look at the history of thought, you can come across accounts about this in the lives of many great scholars, including people like Poincaré, people like Einstein, people like Heisenberg, many, many people. What they say is that in the course of dealing with the problem intensively, while fulfilling all those sufficient, on all those necessary conditions, they had a vision, they had an intuition. In that intuition, they saw the problem. But intuition is not part of the epistemic realm. Intuition is when you are facing reality, you are one with reality. It is an ontological realm. You need to come out, use your memory, your language, your concepts, your categories, and reconstruct what happened to you during that short period of. No, yes.
Not to yourself.
No, even to yourself. Oh,
you don't need to explain.
Oh, let's explain.
Finding.
No, not first. No. No, that is a serious mistake, and it needs to be corrected. When you are one with reality, you are no longer there yourself. There is no knower and a known. No knower and a known. You call yourself a knower because you can put a distance between yourself and the object of your knowledge. This is the epistemic distance. When you are one with your object, there is no knower, there is no identity, there is no thought. There is just one single unified process of becoming.
Arafat, they say some concepts are beyond the level and the capacity of aql.
Doctor, you are talking about concepts.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about
cannot
concepts.
be absorbed by
No,
natural.
listen, I'm not talking about concepts. The concepts belong to the etheric realm. You need to distinguish between these two
The
realms.
findings,
No.
some spiritual unveilings.
No. When they are in the grips of ecstasy, they are no longer there. They are going with the flow. Okay? Only when that transient state, always transient and always short, when that transient state, think about the Prophet when he was receiving revelation. The period of receiving the revelation was always short-lived, always short-lived. Because the Prophet ﷺ in his life was walking in bazaars, was having fun with his wives, was having serious discussion with his friends. In all those situations, he was not in the position of receiving revelation. But as, for example, Ibn Arabi is narrating in his history of the Prophet, when he was receiving the revelation, he was completely detached from the world, completely detached. He would go through that process of getting connected to God, not knowing himself, not knowing the environment, because he was no longer there. That is an ontological phase, has got nothing to do with epistemology, knowledge, nothing. When that stops, then knower himself, in order to be able to grasp what happened, need to reconstruct. So reconstruction is always what needs to be followed. The Prophet ﷺ did the same, reconstruction. And this is exactly the same process which all scientists do. And this is why there is no difference between your discovery of a scientific theory or your spiritual vision during a mystical experience. No difference. Then both, when are reconstructed, can be put to the tribunal of critical assessment. But thank you so much for that interesting question.
Right. I've got nothing online except thank you very much, Professor Paya. That was a very beautiful lecture from Irfan. Anybody else from yes?
Thank you very much, Dr. Paya. I like the very simplified
Okay.
it's perhaps partly these overlapping of what you're saying. I'd like to know whether research methods that one can use to analyze movies, policy, and compare that research method with experimental methods, such as those used in psychology, so that one can get a very clear idea of how to initiate, be able to compare the two.
Okay, doctor. Okay.
So the research methods, for example, in psychology, as you know, we have qualitative and quantitative. And so that it can be kind of an introduction for research students to start at some point. Get an idea about
Aristotle, God bless his soul, 2,500 years ago, said that a good question is half of the solution. You formulated your question not in a very good way. So let me tell you where you have gone wrong. The methods are not knowledge producing tools. Methods have got only two functions. One, collecting data. Secondly, helping you to achieve some practical goals by taking a limited number of steps. Okay? In that respect, methods are completely ordinary tools. What you need to do is not method. What you need to do is a proper methodology in order to help to assess, because your aim is to assess what is going on in the field of psychological claims and in the field of Rumi's claims concerning his findings as Dr. John suggests. Yes, there is actually all methodologies would suggest to you that they are the one which you are looking for. So, for example, look at Anemani Shimel, God bless his soul, phenomenological approach to Rumi and to Islam. She would tell you that if you adopt the phenomenological methodology, you will be able to compare that with your psychological cases because many psychologists are using phenomenological methods, including Freud and all those who are following Freud. Psychoanalysis is a case in point for application of terminology. But of course, in my classes, I teach my students that phenomenology is not a very good methodology. So this is something which I definitely not suggest. Then you can listen to different types of hermeneutists. Hermeneutists will tell you that, look, what you are interested in is to deciphering the meaning which your subjects in your psychological examinations are trying to convey to you and the meaning which Rumi was trying to convey. So different types of hermeneutics, hermeneutic approaches and methodologies are the one which you are looking for. Again, in my classes, I teach that hermeneutics and hermeneutical approaches are suffering from many different shortcomings. Of course, they can be used within the context of a much better methodological tool. The methodological tool which I suggest to you is, of course, as you can anticipate, I'm sure you have already anticipated, is critical rationalism. Critical rationalism is something which helps you to get the gems, the treasures hidden in Rumi and possible glimpse of truth which may be hidden in the psychological claims of your patients.
Maybe we should have another lecture on to outline this one.
All right, okay.
Thank you very much. I think last two questions, there's nothing online to the first from Dara and Ben. I think we had it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Two more questions.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought it is.
No, two more questions.
Well, I mean, it's right. I didn't think that you would be an advocate for the
Yeah, this is Ibn Arabi.
not the Ibn Arabi, radical or the terms in my modified present.
You're right.
Yeah. First of all, I was quite surprised that you an advocate.
But did I advocate any? Did I advocate?
Is good control. Just understanding the background. You obviously supported some of your project of critical rationalism by using Ibn Arabi's criticism upon how one is to qualify the validity of the knowledge claims, right? So he's actually, let me repeat it. But he's saying that this, under this condition, it cannot be valid. Under this condition, it cannot be valid. Under this condition, it cannot be valid. And that's really supports of critical rationalism overall project. So you did not say what is it that it does make it valid. And the question that I would like to put to you is you put all knowledge claims. Could you give me an example of a knowledge claim coming out of any business? What is the term? Nazari and Amali?
Yeah, applied and theoretical.
What?
You mean Irfan? Irfan Nazari, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Just out of my head. Give me an example of knowledge claim that has been derived from Irfan. One, not prophetic revelations or his ascent. Give me one that you're talking about. Yeah. Secondly, when you said that the knower and the object become ones, Are you saying that in that specific moment, they're outside time and space? And if they're outside time or not outside time or space, the third question is whatever the claim, it's the same threefold. So whatever claim they have made, I would like to hear what claims are you talking about? Whatever claims they have made, would they fall into the category of a proposition if either synthetic or analytic? So
Thank you
Can
so
you
much.
answer, can you answer that in one word?
Thank you so much for this very important question. I really appreciate it. As far as the teachings of Irfan concerned, there are plenty of examples which you can find, which are actually interpretations of the verses of the Quran, interpretations of the tradition of the Prophet. They have been trying to find out more about that. That huge tome, huge, because as I said, according to some print, it goes to 100 something volumes. It is all about the Quran.
So are you saying that it's beyond time and space while they are actually?
This is the second part of your question. Yes, you're quite right. When the knower and the known are united, they come into a unification, which, as you're quite correctly suggesting, is outside time and space. Because time and space, as you know very well, with respect to your knowledge about Immanuel Kant, are part of the phenomenal world. Okay, that happens with respect to reality in itself, noumena, not for phenomena. Only when detachment is taken place, attachment becomes detachment, the knower and the known become separated, then the knower is in a position to assess. Because there now he has all his or her epistemic tools at his or her disposal. Applies it, use memory, use language, use categories, use words in order to reconstruct what was happening.
And the third question,
You
would
can-
the claim fall into a
Oh, yes.
synthetic or analytic proposition?
That is a very important point, and again, I should thank you for that. First of all knowledge claims ought to be propositional. There is no other way to convey knowledge, I'm talking about epistemic aware, in the absence of using proposition. Therefore, you're quite right. Those knowledge claims would be either analytical or synthetic. And
How have they been derived outside time and space?
no. They are not being derived. What has happened is that
Or been
the
reconstructed?
mystic or the scientist or the lawyer has had that experience. What he has done afterwards, if his or her reconstruction, and all reconstructions happens inside time and space. All reconstruction. Let me
When does the interaction happen?
No, let me give you this example. It is exactly like this. If God sends some angels from his abode to us in this world, those angels ought to take the shape of human beings or the shape of something in this realm. They cannot remain angels and come to this world. Whatever comes to this world becomes part of this world, acquires the attributes of this world. Okay? Now, intuition, while the attachment, while the unificatory process is going on, is part of reality. As I said, it is part of the flow, part of the process of becoming in reality. Right now, while you're talking, the stream of reality is continuing its work. Reality everywhere. God and all the rest are there. They have not stopped. Okay? When you enter that unificatory experience, you go out of this limited time and space. By you, I mean your spirit, not your physical body. By you, I mean what makes you you. Whatever you are, which we are desperately trying to find out what it is, that becomes unified with realities. So what happens there just impresses upon the spirit, the soul. The soul comes back. Note that I'm using metaphorical
Why
language.
you have to use thought?
Yeah. So the soul comes back and the soul tries to remember, tries to reconstruct. But our reconstructions are always caricatures of reality because we are not perfect. So whatever we produce will be imperfect images of that.
So the intuition.
No,
Yeah, I just want to clarify with you.
no, you can
Yeah,
look
that's
after.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
I just want to ask what the relationship is between research methodology and scientific method.
Methods, as I just mentioned, methods are for collecting data for your research or for achieving a certain aim. For example, suppose you are a chemist and you want to produce sulfuric acid. You ask me, what is the method of making sulfuric acid? I tell you that take these steps, take this compound and that compound, combine the two in this temperature and add perhaps some water, and the result is sulfuric acid. Okay,
Scientific methodology.
this is method. Okay, method is a tool, or for example, suppose you are a social scientist and want to collect data about Muslims in the UK. You go and distribute questionnaires and collect answers. That method of distribution of questionnaire,
Is research methodology the same as scientific?
of course,
That book is about scientific methodology.
yes, and science includes Islamic studies.
So is that like a textbook to get knowledge?
It is a textbook for helping you. It's a tool for helping you in your knowledge pursuit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we have come to an end. We're well over the time that we were expected to do. And thank you very much
for your patience. I'm sorry if I bored you, but anyway, that's it.
No, the fact that everybody's still here, it means that.
No, out of respect for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this. Sort of sales pitch. It was a sales pitch.
No, alhamdulillah. I mean, it's you know, what you're related to your talk, totally. And alhamdulillah, I'm glad you asked because that gives more awareness about the book. Yeah.
Good. T-shirt. Sorry, I didn't convince you. I didn't want to convince you. I wanted to.
I wish to be convinced.